Welcome back to Junior ECTV. I'm your host, Rhiannon Traill, and tonight I want to welcome Sheldon Kennedy, former NHL player and child abuse victim advocate. Sheldon, thank you so much for coming, traveling to be on the show with us today and talk with our students. We're really excited to have you. So I want to start off by asking you this question. You're a household name now in this country, and you've been very outspoken, and you've been a real advocate for children that have been abused, or even in helping prevent abuse. And I just want to know what came behind your decision to go public with your story. What drove that decision for you?
Well, it's great to be here, and especially with our young people, because I think they're the engine about what's going to bring change. So it's an honor to be here. For me, I always thought I was alone, and I'm the only one this ever happened to. Mm-hmm. And when I told my story, and we received about 200,000 letters of people telling us their stories of all types of abuse, not just sexual abuse. And I knew I wasn't alone. And then I ended up being, Newsmaker of the Year in Canada in 1997. I was looking down the lists, and there was prime ministers and Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, and then like Terry Fox and Rick Hansen. And I thought, well, geez, I haven't even done anything. So that's kind of when I made the decision that I can make some waves, and I decided to rollerblade across the country at that time in 1998, and that really spearheaded the journey. I don't know if I've ever really made a real clear decision to say, oh, this is what I'm going to do. Right. Rihanna, it's just kind of evolved, I guess.
You followed your heart, and you followed that passion, but you've been able to inspire so many people and make so much real change, which is so amazing. So I want to talk to you quickly and with our students about the link between abuse and addiction, because I think that so many people don't understand that link and why that link exists. Can you explain to us why that link exists and how that happens?
Well, what we know today, and it's really evolved in the last few years, it's really about the impact on the developing brain and the neural pathways within the brain when kids, young people, very young kids, live in toxic stress and sustained toxic stress environments. And pretty much the brain gets built in either you're hyper or you're hypo. Okay. Either you can't shut your head off because that's the way it's built. If you live in living in fear and constant stress,
that fight or flight.
That's
mode.
That fight or flight. It's like you think of it like this: if the saber-toothed tiger is chasing you 24/7. Yes. And that's the way you feel. And so what are ways that we turn our heads off? What are ways that we know that work? Right? Risky behavior, addiction, violent behavior. I mean, there's all types of ways that aren't healthy.
Escape that.
Totally.
Yes.
To try to get us out of self, get us out of self, and that's what we know today through the science and the imaging of the brain.
Okay. No, that's such an interesting piece of information, I think, to actually understand that the neural pathways actually change when a young person is in those situations, because I don't think we had that science before to understand that link. So I want to open the floor up to you guys and ask you this. Have your parents talked to you about abuse, and how did they approach the subject with you, and do you feel like it worked? Do you feel like you were informed and understood how to maybe prevent yourself from being in situations that could be harmful?
My mom always taught me from a young age that if I needed her help, to come to her, and I've always had a very open relationship with her. Yeah. I was told the story of my grandpa. He was actually trying out to be on a baseball team when he was really young, and the coach said, why don't you come back to my house and we'll give you some private lessons and I'll help you and make sure that you excel on the team. So my grandpa's like, he's young, and he tells his parents, and parents say, okay, that doesn't sound too out of the ordinary, so go ahead. And he goes over, and the coach is trying to make a move on him, and my grandpa went home and told his parents. So it's always been, in my family, if you're in trouble, you ask an adult for help.
Okay, which is good. Anyone else have any experiences of how their parents have handled talking to them about these situations?
Well, my parents specifically didn't really have that conversation about abuse and like the stuff that's out there, but I know that they were aware that I knew. But when it comes to like substance abuse or any type of dangerous situation, they would always be like, honestly, like if you have a phone, you call. If you don't have one, find someone who does. And they're really big on the fact about like, I know you're going to do it anyways, or when you're a teen and you're trying, so I'd rather you do it under my supervision or under my watch. So they really, really open and just forward thinking with anything that I wanted to do, like just having a group of friends over, and like that's how they sort of made sure that there was no abusive situation happening.
My family was really interesting because from a really, really, really young age, I can always remember my parents telling me, like, okay, you have to be careful and you can't go out during these certain hours, and you really have to watch out for the people who you trust and the adults in your life and everything. And even to this day, my dad will always make sure that, like, if I'm getting really close to the teacher, if I'm getting really close to the coach, he's like, is everything okay? And I'm like, yeah, like, everything's okay. And he always had that like availability where I could say something to him, and
dialogue.
And he always made sure that I knew, like in a situation like that these things are wrong and to talk to someone. And he always told me, like, if something did happen, it was never your fault, so don't feel shameful about it, just come tell us so we can get help and we can do what we need to do. So my parents were very open to me about it from a very, very young age, and I think a lot of that revolved around the fact that I was an only child and I was the only girl, so they were kind of thought that maybe I couldn't fight it off as much as maybe a boy could, which obviously that's not true because it happens to boys as well. So for me, it's been really prevalent about, like, you need to be aware of all these things. So, and my dad's number one thing is just don't put yourself in a bad situation, and if it feels sketchy, get out.
Okay, which is all good advice, but I think the reality is that a lot of young people that find themselves in these situations, the perpetrator is often somebody who they know very well and who has a relationship with them and their families, and a lot of people do not speak out about this. So why do we think that young people struggle to seek the help or to red flag a situation? Where does that come from? And Sheldon, maybe you can
I'll give you a few stats that we have. So we do, in 34 months, we've done 4,000 investigations of child abuse. 68% of those are sexual abuse. The other remaining percentages are severe physical abuse and severe neglect. The highest percentage of kids that we see, 30% of the kids that we see, are 4 to 7. They don't know. They do not know that it's not normal. When they come into school, they think that they're the only ones that this has happened to, and so the reality is that, and then when we start feeling, we get into the little bit into that 10, 11, 12, preteen, teenager years, and we wonder why we feel the way we feel, and we don't connect the dots to potentially something that's happened to us to the way we feel. And we know that over 80% of mental health issues in this country come from and are made up of adverse childhood experiences, experiences that have happened as a young kid that have made that brain develop in a certain way. So to us, it's this is, and I think what all of you talked about was critical. This is about conversation. It's not about the perfect conversation. This, as a parent, as a friend, I think it's just about being able to let people know that it's okay. Like, and if something does happen, it's okay. But I think there's a fear, and the fear comes from, a lot of times we think that somebody jumps out from behind the corner of the building and grabs us and hurts us. But when it's somebody that's close to you or that loves you, that's in a position, and the fear that comes when they say, well, we're going to break up the family, or what shame will this bring on the family? That creates a big fear with that individual to say nothing. And it's like, well, maybe I did do something to deserve that. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe it's not that bad, right? It's not that bad. And I think that's the connection, that we know that it is bad. And it will affect you for the rest of your life if we don't deal with it here, right?